Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Manic Pixie Dream Podcast. I am your host, Caroline Georges, and today we have a really great guest, Melissa J. And I accidentally call her Samantha J sometimes because she really has the aura of Samantha Jones from the HBO sitcom Sex and the City, which is commented on in the beginning of this episode, which just starts there and takes off. Melissa has had an amazing life, and she's going to share that with us, and she's been really just wonderful to get to know, and it's a really good episode. I really recommend it. I hope you guys enjoy it, and have a lovely day. Bye. Hello, welcome to the Manic Pixie Dream Podcast. I'm your host, Caroline Georges, and this is Samantha J, stand-up comedian. Melissa... Why did I say Samantha J? Oh, Samantha J from... What is that from? I don't know why I said Samantha J. I'm sorry, Melissa.
Well, there's the Samantha from Sex and the City, which I would love to be compared to her.
Who wouldn't?
That's
She's
quite
so
a compliment.
I feel like she got so much shit from years back and stuff as being everyone made fun of her for being such a big whore and stuff. But now it's you watch you watch her and stuff, and you just I don't know. It's there's just nothing wrong.
Well, that's actually that was quite the Freudian slip that you would mention her, because that kind of illustrates what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Just the differences in the gender roles,
right,
and the vulnerabilities, and that character especially, she was
right.
Basically,
her whole premise was that she was she fucked like a man.
Yes.
She didn't have attachments. She didn't have relationships very often. And she was really independent and stuff. And then that was such a shocking thing at that time. But
and then it's funny, as soon as you do that, just how exposed you are, just from everybody criticizing her, when any male character, even say on Friends, the character Joey, who was very, promiscuous, very popular. Never heard one criticism of Joey. He even got a spin-off show, but everybody had something to say about Samantha.
Joey had a spin-off show?
Yes, it was ill-fated. Did not last.
I think I heard about that, and I was like, oh, that's why Phoebe and Joey didn't get together in the end, because of that horrible spin-off show. And that never was. I didn't even think it aired. I just thought they were, but I know. Well, Phoebe ended up with Paul Rudd, so I guess that works. But I'm still forever disappointed. But anyways, so transitioning from, you transitioned and you experienced life very differently now as a woman.
Yes.
And
yes.
so
that was something that I believe I have a one-of-a-kind perspective
right
on the differences. Growing up in high school, I played high school football. When I stand up straight, 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, and I grew up, in quite a position of privilege, kind of just the, generic straight white male, standing up straight, wearing new clothes. And I remember the first time, the first time I ever went out in public was at Burning Man in 2013, but that almost doesn't count. That's not quite, general public.
It was your safe space, though.
Yes.
It was your safe
definitely.
space.
And I would highly recommend, just transitioning something like that.
Yeah.
Start out places where you're comfortable with friends. Just walking around in public, doing that kind of thing. It's a whole different experience. And there's what's interesting about the transgender community, just how, I don't want to say misrepresented, but just how misunderstood we are. There's a line from Hunter Thompson where he says that there is no way to understand the ledge, that only those who have fallen off of the ledge can explain it, and they're not around to explain the experience anymore. So with transgenders, it's the exact opposite. The only people that you see are the ones who are brave enough to step out. They're the ones who have fallen off the ledge. And it's the exact opposite that you never hear from the closeted community. That's what defines the closet, basically, is that nobody knows that you're doing something.
Wow.
And so to go out, to start out at a place like Burning Man, I just felt was so essential. It was just great. But then to show up and do stand-up comedy for the first time was a whole different experience. I remember I had this feud with this guy in my town, and he didn't like me. It was a feud over a girl. Everybody wanted to date her, and
Including you?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So were you you were bisexual?
I'm straight.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I guess a lesbian. So yeah, I always joke with my gay friends how I could never sleep with them because I'm too gay. And they think, oh gosh, I'm not gay, and they take it as this like an insult to their gayness. But then I explain that I'm a lesbian, and that's why I could never sleep with them.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's something that's important to remember. There is no correlation between gender and sexuality. It goes in all different directions, and I realize I'm kind of just spinning off on one tangent.
That's
There are just
amazing.
so many aspects to this experience.
Yes.
I first thought I was gay the first time when I put on stockings, and I loved it, and I knew it was something that...
So feeling feminine, even though you're still attracted to women, just feeling feminine made you feel like you were a homosexual? Like,
Not quite the feeling, the feminine feeling. It was the way that society just seems to dictate that that's what you do now. And I thought that because I liked, the way everything fit and the way that everything felt, that just meant that I was gay.
and that meant that you needed to date men.
Yes, yes. And I had this image of me like just grudgingly as this like older, like drag queen, because that's like the image that you see. And I'm in this apartment with this feminine gay man, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'm gay. I guess I'm going to cook you dinner. And I guess this is like, all right, like, oh my gosh. And I even tried to force myself into homosexuality.
What? Okay, so what?
Yeah, so we should probably talk about this first.
Okay, so you went on a date with a guy?
No, I didn't go on a date. I was in Vegas.
Oh, okay.
I had just come out. So this is 2014.
All right.
I had just come out. Cinco de Mayo was the first time real like public doing stand-up, being out in the world. So Cinco de Mayo, and I was in Las Vegas that fall, and I was out there for concerts, and I was out there the night before all my friends showed up. So, and that like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and I almost planned it. I was like, I'll get out there a night early, and I will, I'm going to go to a gay bar, and because I'm gay, and I got really nervous. I didn't want to go out. I had to give myself a little pep talk in the mirror. Like you can do this. And I just thought that the fact that I didn't want to go, I thought it was like stage fright for, like when you do stand up, you're like, all right, I don't want to do this. And then when you get off stage, you're like, how could I ever think of doing anything else? And how could I not be doing this? Yeah. And so I just got in a cab, got all dressed up. And I talk about this in my stand up. I got to a gay bar, to the middle of a dance floor, and had this big drink. And I was just like, nope, I'm not gay. All right. And I was just back at my hotel room, like within an hour, like just sitting there, just so like I was bummed, I was like pictured, like being at these hot tub parties with all these rich men, and they're laying gifts on me and diamonds and everything. And I was just back in my hotel room, like watching TV, like, God, it sure be nice, like changing the channels. Like, it sure be nice to be gay. God, I wish I could be somewhere. And yeah, that's, I don't want to do material on the show, but this is something I talk about this on stage, that just being gay, it's not a choice because I would have chosen it. And that's just not, it's not an accessory that you can just choose, your sexuality. A lot of things choose you. Like being a transgender kind of chose me. Yeah. We say the same thing about comedy, that it's a calling.
Oh, of course.
And you almost hear like that voice, and it's almost not optional, at a certain point. But yeah, that's and I still it's everywhere I go, guys be like, hey, I love you, no homo, no homo. And I'm like, stop rubbing it in. Okay. Like, I know I'm not gay. I've tried, and I'm going to keep trying. Okay. Yeah. That's, one of the biggest misconceptions is just that there's just no correlation between the two, and it would make a lot more sense if there were.
Well, actually, I had experiences with women when I was I think the last time was like I think I was like 19 or something. And I was I was always like really like crazy as like a teenager and stuff and really experimental, and I'd always try something once. And and I just but you know, like guys would want you to make out with each other at parties and that sort of thing. So I would do that, and it was like it was fine, you know what I mean? And it was fun. And there was something kind of dangerous and exciting about it. And then also like getting guys off on it and that sort of thing. So I mean, like I hate to be like that girl and stuff, but it's like when you're 16, it's like you're 16. So but I don't know, like I was accused of being homophobic by a girl that I had slept with. And I know, and it was because I did it as an experiment. I was doing it as an experimental thing, and I was doing it as like a fun thing, and it was always like kind of around like drugs and alcohol also. And but one of my best friends, and she and I had known each other since I think junior high. And so she had a boyfriend at the time, and she's bisexual. She identifies to this day as bisexual and stuff. And I always thought bisexuality was fake. I don't know why. I always just assumed bisexuality was what I was, because I would, you know, participate in that way. And I always just kind of saw it as an action and not a like an inside heart kind of thing. And so she and I ended up, you know, sleeping together, and I was like, and it was nothing to me. It was just like something kind of like weird and different and new, but I didn't identify it as sex or as intercourse. It was just sort of something to do. And then so she and then I just kind of, I don't know, I forget what the conversation that led to it was, and she had a boyfriend, but I didn't want to do it again. And then when she wanted to do it again, I was just kind of like, what, are you dumb? Like, no. And it was just like, that was just, and so she said that I was homophobic because I didn't, you know, see her in that experience.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And and I was just like, I don't know, I remember just being so like, holy shit, like that's true. There's something about somebody's sexuality that is in your heart, you know what I mean, that is such a big part of who you are. And it's like you need to respect it. And so when people are like, you know, I don't know, there's times where you must not feel respected because of.
Oh gosh, yes. And the thing with the phobias, you know, that's just a very inaccurate thing for someone to say to you. You know, you can't help what you feel. You definitely can't help what you feel. And like I said, Lord knows I have tried and tried to be gay, to get over the phobia. And, you know, it's just not.
It's not who you are.
Yeah.
And society, like, do you really feel like it was just a projection of what, like, I mean, I hate, like, I need to find a new phrase, and then, like, society and stuff. It sounds like so, like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's just. Society projects something onto you that you feel like you need to follow that rule to make things easier for you, not just for, you know, yourself, but for other people.
We would use the phrase "the man" instead of society. So when the man tells you that you have to feel a certain way, you're like, no, I am not doing what the man says.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how as we're becoming more and more woke, there was, I forget I believe it was Genuine, was being interviewed on a show, and this trans woman wanted to kiss him, and he was just like, no. And then she said that he was transphobic because, you know, a lot of times the resentment begins when you don't want to get with them, you know. And so I've been kind of playing on that. One of the open mics I host at, one of the guys who comes through, he's on television, and one night he got off stage and he had these, you know, stories of womanizing. And when he got off stage, I was like, you know, would it kill you to hit on me one time? You know, just one time, like no homo or anything. And I threw that phrase at him. And I told him that if he didn't hit on me, I would tell people he was transphobic by the time he got to be like big and famous. So yeah, that's, That's the thing. It's like it's, like when you go to a restaurant, you don't know why you like the menu, the items on the menu that you pick. It's just what tastes good to you.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that, tolerance, it's a good thing, but you also just, as it expands, you have to be tolerant of the fact that some people just aren't inclined or don't have like the most positive feelings. Like
Yeah.
I have friends who they've told me that I'm their first transgender friend, and I don't know if they would be necessarily transphobic, but they're just not on board, like patting me on the back over, what I'm doing. I have friends who don't support the bathroom bill.
Really?
And what I've been doing this little experiments that I just tolerate them for who they are.
Yeah.
I take them, it's like, okay, you have those feelings. And I'm gonna walk around, I wear 5-inch heels, like fishnet stockings on my butt sticking out. And I'm just gonna be whoever I am and not care, what you think. And I think, up to the point of, aggression and meanness and stigmatizing, people have a right to just not be attracted to, whoever they're not attracted to.
Yeah.
And you can just be yourself with that. And it kind of muddies the whole message, when you try and tell people that they like things when they don't. That's when you really lose the message. When the people who, they're kind of like on the fence about certain things. I was, to sum it up, I'm kind of.
So when you say tell people that they like things when they don't, you think that's a bad way of going about things, or you think
Or
that
just
people are
telling
doing that?
people that I'll put it like this, like with sports. I grew up outside of New York City, and I grew up rooting for the Yankees, and I don't like the New York Mets. I
Okay.
have quite a disliking for the New York Mets. I hope there are no Met fans in the room here.
No.
But that's the thing, is that like I'm friends with Met fans, and I support their decision to root for the Mets.
Right.
But you'll never tell me that I have to like that team, or that I have to root for them, or that I have to feel positively towards them. And that's the thing, that if you're not inclined, I'm not going to punch a Met fan over the fact that they like the Mets.
Right.
But the fact that people just aren't, like 100% ready to jump in bed with you, that's something that you have to accept them as you would like them to accept you.
Right. Yeah.
For sure. And it's up to the point of like being mean, stigmatizing people. That's where things get wrong.
First,
Definitely.
do you want to tell us about your first time doing stand up as a woman?
That's right. That was the story that I was trying to get into at first. So that's one thing that I believe I have, is just a completely unique perspective. Growing up, straight white man with all the privileges that, modern American society provides.
I know. You can just go straight to hell.
Then the day when I showed up, it was Cinco de Mayo, 2014.
Cinco de Mayo, 2014.
Yes.
Okay.
A day that will live on in infamy. The way I did it, I showed up. I told people that I was going to play Paris Hilton in a sketch. And all I did, it was just me with just a little dog. And then I was Paris Hilton. And I'd had this feud with this comic, and it had been going on for a while. And when I showed up, I got on stage, and he'd never really said anything to me about it. Never really had bubbled up to the surface. When I showed up to do the Paris Hilton thing for the first time, and I was on stage, he went on his Facebook account and posted. Growing up, my name was Joe. That's where the J in Melissa J comes from. And I grew up in New Jersey, so I go by Jersey Joe. And while I was on stage, he went on his Facebook and posted, "Even in drag, Jersey Joe is not funny." And the first thing, like, this is cross-dressing. It's not
a
drag.
Gimmick. Yeah,
yes.
It's not a gimmick.
And the fact that he'd had that resentment towards me for, just so long, well over a year. And then the minute I showed up in female clothes and was on stage presenting myself as a female, I hadn't even gotten off stage and the gloves had come off, and he felt a license to just be able
Yeah.
to go on social media and just blast me like that. I was behind my back. We weren't friends. And that was, it just crystallized like that moment when I went from being untouchable to suddenly I'm a doormat. And I'm sure you've noticed stand up within the last year. There's been a trend of this anti-transgender material. A lot of comics are doing a lot of bits about, just being very disrespectful to transgenders.
Do
And
you is there an example of that you'd want to?
oh yes, I can give
Some.
many. I was at Flappers, and I'd had a good set, and I'd made some kind of gross jokes, and the comic that went on after me did this thing where he had a jacket on. He took the jacket off, and then took the mic stand out with the jacket as though he didn't want to touch the microphone. And then he closed his set with this thing. He said, the other day I was at the zoo. I was watching a transgender feed peanuts to an elephant, and I thought to myself, which one of them belongs in the zoo? And that was his closing joke. And then he just walked off stage. Now, if I were a comic and I had seen that, okay, that's the premise, I would have said, now there's somebody who knows how to get rid of nuts. That would have been a joke, and I would have laughed at that, and I would have liked it, and I found it's funny, but that was all he said, was just that he felt that I belonged in a zoo, and then just got off stage, and nothing was said about it. And in this age of, which I agree with, like all, you can't really talk about anybody like that anymore, but for some reason, we're like the lowest rung on the totem pole. And so we're getting the brunt of all that style of abusive comedy. It's just, and, about a year ago, the Chappelle special that came out,
Oh, I remember that.
I was very elaborated about how he felt that black people weren't doing it, that brown people weren't doing it, that it was an extension of white privilege, which is false on so many levels. He performs at the Comedy Store. He's been on Sunset Boulevard. Black people are totally doing it. What about RuPaul's Drag Race? And that kind of almost painted like a bullseye on my back, for open mics. It was though he took all the sins of the white race and just dumped them off on the transgender doorstep. And then it turned into, I'd be at mics and it would just be like a contest. This person would, rail on transgenders, and then the other person would try and outdo them, and it would just go on and on.
But are they funny when they're doing it? Like, are they getting laughs?
Not really.
Yeah.
They're getting laughs, and it gets scary, almost just from like the other transphobic comics. It's not so much laughter as it is cheerleading, like approval, like, yeah. I've been at mics where that happens, and then you just hear these guys start like, yeah, and groaning and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's been quite an interesting experience just to go from sitting in first class to like hanging on to the wheel of the airplane. And that's the thing. It's like I have to sit at these mics. I have to go there and then hear these things that are said about me, and then somehow feel as though I belong in this industry.
Yeah.
When all my peers are, like it was to a point where it's like 60 to 70% of the material at some of the mics was just anti-trans. And so that's been, it's been quite the fall from grace, I believe would be the term.
But you're being true to your identity, and
Yes.
you're being yourself.
Yes.
That's it's a really, you're brave for doing that and stuff, but it's like you kind of have to make that choice to be brave every day, otherwise you have to go back to being how you were.
Yes.
And which you're not comfortable being.
No, it's like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I do Postmates, and sometimes late at night I'll have to jump into boy clothes just to be safe.
Really?
And at that point, it's like pulling teeth for me.
Yeah.
It's really, but what gets me through, I heard this quote from this woman. I was on this discussion panel,
Mm.
and the way she put it was that, people would say to her, "Don't you worry about something happening to you." And the way she put it was that at least it will be happening to me. It will be happening to the real me, who I really am, versus being safe and not being who I am. And there's that saying that, I don't want to sound too glib, but that saying that, a coward dies 1,000 deaths, a soldier dies but once. And that's kind of what the motto almost of, how you get through. It's that you got to be who you are, or else you die every moment of every day. And that's kind of what gets me through, for sure. But I did have to fall back a little bit from the stand up, almost just as a means of safety,
Mm-hmm.
because in there, some late night mics, people get drinking, and there was one mic I really like to go to. It was prone, there'd be like fist fights, and it had this like Wild West kind of feel to it. And out of safety, I just had to stop. And that's kind of why I believe the community, like why we're so misrepresented in the first place. The people to step out, to go beyond that
Mm-hmm.
threshold, to fall over the ledge, like what
Yeah.
I was talking about earlier. That's why I love the drag queens. It's that personality that they're like the pioneers, the
Yeah.
ones who have just gotten it out there. But that's the personality it takes to live, on a day-to-day basis like that.
I really love that because I've always been really I hate the slut stigma. I've always been
Mm-hmm.
really sensitive about being called a slut or
Mm-hmm.
being and I but I I read that in this book there's this quote and it's um like you can't gain purity through inexperience. You know what I mean? If you live a
Wow.
life being, just not doing anything wrong and being safe and just, going about things, you know, the safe way, then you're not really an innocent person. You're not really a
Hmm.
pure person after going through that because you never experienced
Hmm.
like the test that, and so I really loved that because I've had, all of these experiences that make me a slut, that make me like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
what, these things that I could get called. But I don't know, like I know so many women who didn't go through what I went through and are nice people and stuff, but they gained being nice people by not going through what I went through. And I
Mm-hmm.
went through things and I'm still a nice person. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like I can choose being a piece of shit in these ways and have an experience power in certain ways, but I'm choosing not to. And so it's like so it's like I'm earning my own purity and I'm actually like it's deserved almost. And so it's
Hmm.
I mean, what you're going through is you're making yourself a whole and unique and a good person
Mm-hmm.
by making these choices. And it's not a lot, and it's like your test and it's your experience. And so after you go through it and you're still a good person, then that's like more than I can experience in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually like a really amazing thing. But
Hmm.
I need to find that book and figure out what that quote was. But there's more to it. But it
That
was just
makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's you got to be the one to live your life. Don't have a choice in a lot of things that you are who you are, basically.
Mm. I mean so much. I mean I think one of the points of this podcast is just to like explore like what is about me is what society is telling me about myself versus who I really am.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much that like is this really me? Like is this really who I am as a person or is this like a society thing telling me this is how I should operate?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's just one of those things where it's just like sometimes I don't know. I can't tell the difference between what I want and what I should want and what I am and what I think I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really
these are really hard questions to navigate. I don't think everything you get done. I think there are always just going to be new questions about yourself that you have to like, just an unending maze.
Well, you have two selves. There's who
Two selves.
you are, and then there's who society wants you to be. Even getting back to like Samantha. The whole thing with men, it's like they don't want a girl to be a slut, but yet sluts are very popular. That's how they
Right.
got to be sluts in the first place, is that everybody takes two to tango.
Yes.
And so everybody sleeps with them.
Yes.
And our whole society, marketing, we use sex to sell soda.
Yes.
It's everywhere you look. But then the minute, a woman engages in it,
Right.
it's
in a way that's like there's an autonomy over herself, and she
Yes.
actually like, okay, well,
Yes.
if the society is going to sexualize me, then I might as well sexualize myself in the way that I would prefer to be sexualized.
Mhm.
Yes.
And what's interesting too, with stigma, it creates a fetish. When it's almost as though when we make something taboo,
Yes.
it makes it illicit. It was one of the arguments for legalizing weed. It was just that putting it on the table. Now it's like there's shops on every corner. You can just see the stoner lifestyle for what it is. It's cool. I love smoking pot, but
yeah, for sure. But at the same time, like, it does make people lazy. It can make
Yes.
people it turns people into losers, for sure.
Yes.
Like, I mean, a lot of people will be like, I won't smoke pot because it turns people into losers. And it's like, well, you're not wrong. Totally does. Like, I've turned into a loser a ton of times because of smoking marijuana. So, yeah,
yeah,
like,
I did too.
You're not wrong.
I called that college. But that's the thing I've noticed with being stigmatized. I've not, going back to that Chappelle special. I remember.
Did that hurt? Because I remember. I mean, I liked it and stuff, but I remember when he got into those jokes, and because I think that there was like controversy over comments he made before and stuff.
Yes.
And then he went back to it and kind of, made more jokes about it.
The jokes didn't bother me. The lies was when he was trying to justify how he had this massive amount of transgender comedy material. And he was just trying to justify why, he was doing it. And he just said that it was a thing that we were like bending over backwards to protect these privileged white people. And he said black people aren't doing it. Brown people aren't doing it. It's a white thing. That's what bothered me. As far as jokes go, that's just the, freedom of expression. If I see a comic and they're making, transgender jokes that I don't care for, that I feel are mean-spirited, then that's just democracy in action. I can tune out. I cannot watch that special.
Exactly. Yes.
That, and some of them are even funny.
Yeah.
Like I've heard some trans jokes that, okay, if you feel that poking fun at the awkwardness is a way to bring it into the fold, and it's clever, and I don't mean the awkwardness that transgenders are awkward, but just the awkwardness of the interaction with people who, haven't seen us. If that's going to help you, then okay. But what bothered me was him riling people up that it was okay, that somehow. And that's what happened with the stand-up experience that I've been having, is that he just gave this justification that we're now the punching bags. We're in this very hyper PC environment, which, I agree with. A lot of the old style comics are having a hard time because that was a lot of, how they would fill their sets, is they would make fun of this group of people. They would make fun of that group of people. And so there's a lot of resentments, about just being policed, about being controlled, and I get that. And that's kind of like what he was reacting to and like what he was commenting on. But, God, there's so many things I want to talk about with, I should probably mention just to the viewers that I did wake up with food poisoning this morning.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. So let's,
Gotcha.
How about
Oh, actually, can I just finish my point?
Oh, of course. I'm sorry about that.
I'm sorry. When people get stigmatized and then fetishized. So what I've noticed is that since then, there's been a demographic of these black male comics who are just really ramping it up really stepping up, the aggression and the verbal abuse. And what I'm noticing was that when I was a kid, there was this dynamic, and it's been going on, that there was this whole demographic of white women who were just infatuated with black men. It was all that they wanted to do was date black men. And I believe that was because of the stigma that our society had placed on black men. We stigmatized them, therefore they were fetishized, and what I've noticed is that I've gotten so much support from black women. They've been so, they love what they see. They love the rebellion and the confidence. They respect that. And I've noticed that when these black men are getting all upset with me, I can see the black women are like, almost like getting a little bit aroused, almost like getting a little bit turned on. And it's funny just how the situation really flips the script, turns the tables, how what happened to them where they were stigmatized and then they were fetishized. And I'll see, there'll be like, a cute black girl watching this guy get all uptight about me and then looking at me like, ooh. And I'm like thinking of the black guy, like, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's almost like they're my wingmen.
Oh, that's a good way of looking at it. So let's talk about our hypocrisies. So
yes, everyone has them.
We do. Okay. So my hypocrisy is obviously like I have this Me Too podcast where it's like a post Me Too. This whole thing is supposed to be about like women's issues in response to Me Too. And but I am still like into rape fantasies and stuff like that, and it's one of those things where it's like I'm reading a book right now where it's like there's this girl and she's just being raped by this hot guy like the entire time. And it's like all of these romance novels that I'm reading and then all of these movies that I'm watching and that sort of thing, it's like it's rape and rape. And I'm like, but it's like it's romance in the book and it's romance in the movie and that sort of thing. But when you really look at it and stuff and have it broken down for you, it's actually really like predatory and would be the kind of thing that would drive a woman to commit suicide if she's not killed by the person doing those things to her. And it's like, but I love it. And it's like one of those things where I'm just kind of like, I'm so embarrassed that I love these things and stuff. And I was telling you about that video essay that I watched on Harrison Ford characters. And it's like, I hate it because it's like I loved those three characters. And like the video essay breaks down Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford's character in Blade Runner, and then his character in Star Wars, which is Han Solo. And and then that breaks it down his behaviors towards the love interest, and it's all like very predatory. It's all of him like, yes, you want it, and she's like, no, leave me alone, and then she like gives in and that sort of thing. And it's like, and you break it down, you really break it down, it's like, holy shit, he's raping her. And it's like, but at the same time in the movie it's totally romantic and you're totally like, it's your heart's aflutter over Harrison Ford, but it's like he's being predatory. And so I just I don't know, like it's just one of those things where it's just like I totally endorse it. I totally think it's great. I would love more of it and stuff. But at the same time, I think in real life, if you separate it from the fantasy, it's probably awful and people should stay away from it, But at the same time, it is like a thing I'm interested in, as far as entertainment wise.
That's, it's like that fetishes, you don't really choose them either.
Right.
You don't, it's just like when you go like with the menu at the restaurant.
Right.
You have appetites that, you don't, that does make sense though. Because fetishes, according to Freud, are based on our fears.
Yes.
And that what he felt that, that when people had a fear of something, that they would incorporate it into a sexual activity.
Yeah.
And it would be a way to like sort of, soothe the fear or to calm it. And I guess like bondage would be the best example. That's like one of, everybody is afraid of pain. Nobody likes it. Everybody has issues with it. But when you incorporate it, into a sexual act, it's a way to cope with it. It's a way to make everything okay. And so that sort of just explains like the hypocrisy in terms of why, you'll be so opposed to something. Like the dynamic of like the Republican senators, who they're, anti-prostitution. They pass all these laws against it, and then it turns out they're sleeping with prostitutes. And so that's just part of the hypocrisy, comes from just how we use sex as a means to bring our fears out into the open, to
Sure.
deal with them and to address them. Like cuckolding is one.
I know, and that's like the
And
number one thing
yeah.
in California is cuckolding, which is but so crazy to me, like cuckolding, because it's like I have a friend who's really into it, and I thought it was one of those things like guys really like it, but I have a girlfriend who's like, or a female friend who's really into cuckolding porn, and she thinks it's hilarious. She thinks it's so funny, and it turns her on, and I don't know, like I actually haven't seen any of it yet, but because I don't want to see it, but I don't know, like it's just what about having your partner get fucked in front of you is so appealing, do you think? What it would have?
Well,
but again, hypocrisy. We're like judging somebody for what they're into. It's like, oh well, I mean, like I would love to be more open and be less judgmental of people. It's like, oh, you like to see your partner having sex with somebody else right in front of you. Oh, that's great.
Well, adultery is one of the main fears that people have. And so then when you can bring, it's the fear. And also there was just there's a segment of it where it's the white man is watching the black man have sex with his white wife, and that just came from like just the fear that white men had of black men for the last several hundred years, basically, and it was almost just a way to like cope with that.
So you were married?
Yes.
For 10 years.
Yes. Wasn't married the whole time, but we lived together for 10 years.
Wow. So
Definitely.
So what was that like? Were you were experiencing, you were the male counterpart in a relationship, in a heterosexual marriage, and you identified as a man then?
Yes.
Did you come out of the closet as transgender while you were married or after?
Yes. We got together in 2002.
Okay.
We were together from 2002 to 2012. And the first article of women's clothing that I tried on was my wife's.
Aww.
And
what was it?
Fishnet stocking, which is just the generic go-to guys, drag queens. They love the fishnets. And it's a great way to start out. It's interesting too. You'll see the male expression of female sexuality a lot, through how people cross-dress. And, like with me, I do have the big boobs. And it's funny how when you watch, the combined demographic of men who dress as women, when you watch their behavior tendencies, they tend to emulate the very same things that they are stigmatizing. They very often dress like the promiscuous females who they are so afraid of in the first place that they would call them sluts. And that's what's interesting when, like when the men are running the show, suddenly it's okay to dress like this and be all provocative and show a lot of skin. So, yeah, but that came through her. I put on one of them, and then I just felt, it just didn't feel right. Like there was just so much energy, I feel like, among lingerie and, in garments like that. And she was out of town. And then I just went to a store and just bought some of my own things. And here we are today.
Did you tell her that you bought some of your own things? Like what was her attitude about it?
I didn't tell her for 4 years.
Really?
So
it was just whenever she was out of town, it was something that you just like to do for yourself?
Yeah. And then I noticed that the more times she was saying that she was going out of town, the more, woohoo, like, oh, sorry, I'm going to miss you. I'm really going to miss you when you're gone. But then we got married in 2009. And my family came out to visit for the wedding. And I was like 3 days before we got married. And I just felt this sense of, like we were like this close to getting married, and I just felt like I could tell her anything. And then when my family came out, I realized it was just a lot of the traditional values that I'd been raised with that were preventing me The thing that was foolish about that was that she would have been so supportive even in 2005 if I would have told her.
Really?
And just for some reason, I just, just kept it hidden, for sure.
Do you regret not telling her until?
I can't say I have any regrets.
That's great.
Obviously it hasn't been complete perfection. But again, you can't, no, you just can't really regret, the way you feel. You can't regret if you like pizza instead of hamburgers or whatever, at that time. And very often we tend to go back and try and relive our lives as the people we are now. And with the level of comfort and acceptance.
Go back and live our lives as the people that we are now.
Yes.
So what is?
Yes. Well, just so now I'm up, I'm on a level where I'm comfortable and I accept myself. And then I try and go back to high school. I'm like, well, why didn't I do this in high school? Why didn't I do this sooner? And because you weren't the person that you are now. And that's one of the almost the curses of wisdom and aging, is that you tend to wish that I could have gone back, and just even as I knew when I was maybe like 5 years old, I'd had this desire to just run into my mom's room and just try on all her things. And I heard Caitlyn Jenner's interview. She described that was the same thing, that she just went and put on one of her mom's dresses. And, and then recently, I've just been like, well, why didn't I just do when I was in high school? And because I'm, not the person that I am now. How does that go? I'm not the person I was then that I am now. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Emotional transference. That's something that you've been passionate about.
Yes.
So would you like to elaborate on what that is?
And that's how, you talk about, so there was the time, I accepted myself. There was several years where only one person knew. I came out to one person, and that was just my wife. And
so you came out to her in 2009? Okay.
Yes.
And then how long were you guys married after that?
We were together until 2012.
Did you being transgender have anything to do with?
No.
Really?
No, it had
she
nothing
was totally
to do.
accepting. And
10 years is a long time to be with somebody.
Yeah.
And what happened was, we basically moved to a small college town, and she had an affair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And that's that. I wouldn't be here now if none of that would have ever happened. And that's kind of the thing. There's a saying in meditation that there is no wrong path. And as that wherever you're at, even, give a hypothetical example. If, you get into a car accident and then suddenly you're a paraplegic, then you can inspire, paraplegics. You can go give talks. You can write books. That's where you're meant to be. And there are, people who will need you, and you will find your purpose on that path.
But we're not talking about serial killers. If you're a serial killer.
Yes.
There are wrong paths.
There are some wrong paths.
There are some wrong paths. But that's not.
But even if you find yourself, let's say if you had been a serial killer.
Yes.
And then you suddenly realize.
Then everything happens for a reason.
Well, that's true too.
So,
we really need to go on a crime spree. I love the way you rationalize. We can get away with a lot. But if, you find yourself, let's say you had been a serial killer, and then you find yourself sitting in prison and you regret what you've done.
Yes.
Then you can, you can teach others who have those antisocial urges. You can change the world from wherever you're at.
Yes.
And that's prison, I guess, would just be like the best example.
Mm-hmm.
People changing their lives, finding a whole new purpose. And so just as far as, not to compare it to being transgender, but that's kind of the thing. It's just that I'm where I'm at right now, and mistakes were made. I'm sure my parents would be the first ones to agree with that. Mistakes have definitely been made along the way, but now that I'm here, I
love that.
That's one of the.
I'm here now. Mistakes were made, but I'm here now. I love that. That's a good way of looking at it.
I think that comes from
mistakes were made.
Is that from a government press conference? I forget. That's a quote where they just messed something up so bad. And this guy just got up at a press briefing and just, mistakes were made and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I always love that saying. But that's funny, that relates to like emotional transference. And one of the main things that I'm trying to do with my life right now, it's that same dynamic about how misrepresented the transgender community is, you don't see very many of the members. We're so in the closet.
Right.
And that's because it is so tough to walk around. And the reason why I know that the suicide rate among transgenders, it's well over 40%.
It's very high.
And people attribute that falsely to that they regret their decision and that it was a bad choice. But so much of that is the stigma that we face. And I'll put it to you like this in terms of why you don't see very many members of the trans community, is that for thousands of years, people lived without language. And so it'd be like if you and I, if we were cave people, cave woman and cave woman and cave man wanting to be cave woman, or all points in between. And we were in the woods. We didn't have language. We weren't able to communicate with words. So if a bear were coming up to eat us, I would have a look on my face like, oh my God. We are, as human beings, we're genetically hardwired that we would have to pick up on that emotion of fear so we could turn around and run away and stay alive. And through Darwinism and evolution, that trait just got magnified. And that's just the concept of emotional transference, that we are genetically wired to pick up on the emotions of those around us. We have to feel how others feel. If we didn't, then we wouldn't be here in the first place. And that all comes from how we were cave people, and it's in our DNA. And your DNA takes 10,000 years before it's going to change or before it's going to evolve. And so we are still wired as a survival mechanism that we pick up on the emotions of others and we feel them, we internalize them. So when you're trans and you're walking around the supermarket and you get that, and this applies to everybody. We're all different in one way or another. Minorities, women, when guys are like, casing you out, we have to feel how others feel.
Yeah.
And that is just the, I hate to use the term, but I guess just the death of just so many of us, not physically, but socially. And, we pick up on that stigma. And the way that I get through my life, the way that I survive the experience is I don't even know how many dozens of times a day, I just keep reminding myself that there's no bear coming. That when these people look at me, I don't have to feel the way they feel. There's a glitch. It's like we're all running Windows 97 as human beings. We have an outdated operating system. We're cave people living in big cities. We're doing the best we can with it. And that's why it's just so difficult for transgenders, if you're that punk rock kid with the pink mohawk in your town, and you have to pick up on those emotions.
Right.
And I've been able to master the process. And now it's I've just so rationalized it that dirty looks, I've almost learned to enjoy them.
Really?
I'm fully aware that there is no bear coming. And every dirty look I get, I just see it as one less dirty look for the younger kids that are going to be coming up after me. And that's kind of what gets me out of bed every day, is just, that we're sort of just draining. There's only so much resentment that humanity can have. And you look at the way that gay men have been able to incorporate themselves. I don't want to say minorities. We've made a lot of progress. Minorities are still, so are gay men.
Right.
Everyone is. But we progress. That's the arc of human nature.
Right.
We always have moved towards positions of tolerance. Couple, mistakes have been made along the way as well. The reformations or whatever that was called. But, we move in the direction of good. And even it seems like we've taken a step backwards in race relations. But, 50 years ago, we all couldn't sit and eat lunch at the same counter together, black people and white people.
That's true.
And now we're doing mics, making fun of each other for, being white, being this, being that. And we do move forward. And that's just how I look at the purpose of my life, is that every abusive comment, every dirty look, just sort of draining like a big reservoir, and that's just less that the younger kids are going to have to deal with. But it's it's not easy. I've definitely had struggled with depression, substance abuse, and that's part of the misrepresentation of transgenders is that you tend to see there's a lot of just just behavior, a lot of substance abuse, suicide, depression, and that's not who trans people are.
Right.
What society is seeing is a reflection of themselves at that point.
Well, I mean, depression, I mean, it's a huge epidemic, I mean, for a lot of people and stuff. And I mean, I think that because, like you were saying, people are, I mean, the suicide rates are probably the same. It's just you weren't seeing it because people were in the closet.
Yes.
And, unfortunately, when you commit suicide, you become a statistic. And you become a number. And so it's like if somebody's not out of the closet, if somebody's in the closet and succumbs while they're in the closet and commits suicide, then you're not going to know what they were dealing with or what they were struggling with. And if what they were struggling with was that I'm a biological man and I feel like I'm a woman, and I feel like, and I can't leave the house looking the way I want to look, and I can't leave the house feeling like I want to feel. And I mean, even me, like sometimes it's like if I'm having a really shitty day or a really shitty week, like I put on more makeup or I put on more lipstick or I wear more perfume, and it just makes me feel a little bit better. And so I can't imagine, I mean, that's just like a small, obviously a little nugget on like maybe on something that like a lot of transgender women experience. It's that they can't leave the house looking the way they want to look to make themselves comfortable, to make their day better. And and I think it's like on a larger scale than what I obviously but
what's interesting about that is I don't know why I keep getting back to these prison analogies for some reason.
Do you feel like being transgender is like being in prison sometimes, or like the stigma feels like is
no,
that the connection?
The exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. What fascinates me about prison is I always thought that if anything ever happened to me and I had to go away, I would do something and I would just get myself put in solitary confinement because I wouldn't want anybody, beating me or attacking me or anything
a lot
like
of people
that.
do that.
And it turns out that is way worse for an individual than being in general population.
But they do put people that are vulnerable in solitary confinement, and it's like kind of like a protection, but it's like a huge punishment, and it's really unfortunate.
And prisoners would rather, the majority of prisoners would rather be in general population where they risk, being stabbed, being raped, just any number of things that can happen. And it's funny how it's almost better to spend time with these horrible monsters who are doing these terrible things than just spending time alone as the ultimate form of punishment.
Yeah.
It fascinates me how like hermetizing and the things that brings out in a person. And so if you're transgender and you're in the closet, it's almost that form of solitary confinement.
Wow.
Where it's much worse than being out in general population. And the conclusion I've learned is that I would rather just, not to, be glib, but I would just rather have other people beating me up than have me be the one beating me up. And that's kind of the double-edged sword.
Wow.
When you're in the closet, you deal with those issues. And then when you come out, then you have to deal with, like the danger, the violence, being stigmatized. But I would have to say, if anybody is hearing this and, you are in the closet, you are considering, there are no easy choices. And I'm not, saying that is the right thing for you to do is to come out. But, sometimes it's just better if other people are doing those things to you versus having yourself be the one who loathes you and despises you.
Exactly. I really love that. What was your last date? When was your last date?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm a stand-up comic.
So you probably, are you popular with the ladies? I
am. And yet it's sort of, it mocks me just how single I've been recently.
It mocks me how single I've been.
Yeah. Gosh, the last date that I have been on, it has been quite a while. Gosh, we just went out. I really wish, as romantic as I am and as many good dates and as many good advice, I have to say the last date we just got drunk and had sex.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no complaints. No complaints here. But yeah, dating is I one thing I noticed the first time I was in public as a female, this rather, opportunistic man approached me and was attracted to me. He looked me up and down, and then he said, "Can I buy you a drink?" And I could see this playbook in his head that like he wanted to buy the drink, maybe buy a second one, and then like when does the sex come? And I'm looking at, and after
was this the first time you saw the playbook and was able to identify it? Because that happens to me all the time, where it's just like it's like the Groundhog Day thing, where it's like I'm on. This is the 5th time this guy has tried this on me. This
was almost like the Fight Club moments where it was like that was me the whole time because I didn't even quite realize it. And that's one thing, ladies.
You were able to identify the playbook from using it yourself.
That I had done that.
Okay.
And that's one thing I'd have to say, ladies. You just got to cut the fellas some slack because so much of it is on a subconscious, instinctive level.
Right. But at the same time, like sometimes like I know this might sound kind of odd, but I get offended by certain people who catcall me because sometimes it's like he's not catcalling me because he thinks I'm pretty. He's just catcalling me because he catcalls every girl that walks past him. And so it's like you want to feel special and unique, but sometimes it's like you really see like this guy, this is just what this guy says to every girl he talks to that he finds attractive. And then this is what this is this guy's playbook, his game, like
maybe the guys could learn to personalize the cat calls.
That's what I think. I mean, just like make it special and unique to the person. Yes, that's what I think. But yes,
and not to be like that, but if I were cat calling you, there's quite. I mean, you got you got quite a great set of legs.
Thank you so much.
So much about you that they could have, heckled
on my legs.
I like to give advice to hecklers
it
too.
To me as an individual.
But I would have to say, ladies, guys, that so much of what they do is on a subconscious level. They don't even realize that they're doing it. And when I
big time animals.
Watched that gentleman try to buy me the drink to get me into bed, the first thing was that I was like, good God, I've done this a million times. And this is why it had never worked, because nobody wants to be quantified. After what I had been through personally,
quantified?
In terms of that's what I was worth. And my whole struggle, all, I had learned to put on makeup, I had learned, trying to, ways to walk, how to like not throw my back out with stockings on. And that's when I'm worth $3.75 for, like a vodka cranberry and a double, maybe $5.50.
Yeah.
And that's my value. And that's the thing that
the expectation is offensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so when I go on dates, there's that formula, the expensive restaurants, the impressing. Guys will hit on themselves. They'll do things that they would like if somebody did to them, like spend a lot of money, drive a nice car. That kind of thing. I've noticed that as a woman, I'm more concerned with how I feel versus than with what I have. And when I was a man, aside from fashion, of course, I do get a little catty when it comes to that department.
Really?
But I love high-end clothing. No apologies. I'm not materialistic. I'm very grounded spiritually. But I just feel that, fashion is an extension of your spirit. And it's almost like spiritually, I guess I'm a porn star.
So spiritually, you're a porn star? Okay, what?
Well, that's just how I like to dress.
Oh.
Is that, fashion is an extension of, your spirituality.
Right.
And that's for some, this is just how I like to dress. No apologies. But aside from that, I'm not very into just how I feel, walking down the streets. It's not... Guys are just so concerned with a scoreboard. We went to this restaurant. I spent this much money. I drive this kind of car. And I feel it's like one of those arcades where, you win enough tickets, you get the big stuffed bear. Mm-hmm. Or, like on the boardwalk when they have those games. And so like with dating, I'd way rather just go have an experience. Just like run through the park. take a class on like ballroom dancing, something like that. And I think that's something that being female has sort of just got me in touch with like that aspect of the experience. So generally, like when I go on dates, really just like to avoid, the big showy, spendy things, because then it's like you're just saying to a girl, like, this is your price tag. Like you go to the mall and this costs this and this costs that. And that's how I felt when that guy tried to buy me that drink. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, it's going to take a couple sports cars, a mansion, a couple of vacations.
Well, I mean, I guess like with me, like sometimes it's like a guy is doing something for me because he does really like me, and because he's doing it for me because he likes Caroline and he wants Caroline to be happy. So he wants Caroline to have dinner and a drink and a movie. You know what I mean? But it's not like, but then sometimes it's like sex with Caroline. So dinner, drink, movie equals sex with Caroline.
Yes.
And so like sometimes it's like I'm a part of an equation versus I'm being courted.
Yes.
And so you can tell the difference. And sometimes it makes me angry. Like I snap. Like it's just like, oh, I see what you're doing. You think that by buying me dinner and by getting me a drink and by taking me to a movie that you're going to have sex with me. And it's like, I don't know. I hate to be, I don't hate to be, I don't know. Like I get this sense of like vengeance. It's like, I'm just going to take the dinner and take the drink and take the movie and tell this guy goodnight and never talk to him again, and it's like, that. And so, and leave him with nothing. And I feel fine doing that because I know like, it's just.
Well, they always say, can I buy you a drink? You can do anything you want.
Yeah,
you can give me $1 million. That doesn't mean that, there's any social contract here. And that's the thing that once I'm with somebody, I really like to provide for them. I definitely, that's one thing I've noticed with being transgender. Going back to how we're still cave people, in a big city, women do like to be provided for. And
but also I love taking care of a man too. You know what I mean? So it's like, I love like, let me put your feet up. Let me rub your back. You know what I mean? Let me take care of you. Let me make you dinner. Like I love doing that. You know what I mean? But it's like, I don't want to do that for everybody. And I don't want to, I don't know, like, so there are some people that would feel so unnatural and wrong to be that way towards, and it's like, but then there are some people that it feels fine being that way. And it is like, because it's like, it's that person and because it's me with that person. And I don't know. Does that make sense?
It made sense.
Okay.
I'm with you the whole time. Yes. I'm with you the whole time.
But at the same time, like, I don't know, like there's genuine and there's ingenuine and like kind of what your intentions are in the situation and stuff. But
I worked in food service and we had this thing, it was just called the smell test.
Right.
If you were wondering if something is rotten,
right,
just smell it. And that's with the trans jokes, what we were talking about earlier. There's a smell test when comics are up there. And if they're lightheartedly making, jokes about the experience, or if they're just taking hate speech and packaging it up as stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Same thing with people. Some people just want you to, women do like to be provided for, and it's not that they're greedy or that they're gold diggers. It just all goes back to how like we were cave people and they have an instinctive need to know that their children would be provided for. That if I'm sleeping with you and there's a chance that, at some point. That's another thing, is that we don't really understand contraception on a genetic level. So when we engage in sex, there are child rearing issues that women consider. If I got pregnant, can this guy feed the kids, or are we going to just die in the wilderness, which would happen back in those days, that if they didn't procreate with a strong man with a lot of weapons and knew how to provide food, their bloodline wouldn't be here in the first place to be accused of being gold diggers.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is like, we're stuck with these operating systems.
It's funny how times change, because now I think a collection of weaponry is like such a big turnoff for most women nowadays.
Yeah, well, it symbolizes aggression these days. We don't really need them anymore.
Yeah.
The weaponry in this situation would be, a trust fund. The things that would protect, things that would insulate them. And we're not really, fighting with, knives and bats anymore. And so that's kind of where like the sports cars and all that, it's not that they're phony or, that they're disingenuous. It's that that's how our operating system, that they have a need to know that if, we're going to procreate, that the kids will be taken care of.
In a sports car versus.
I do love modern society.
Yes.
That's for sure. But that is one thing, though.
Drive the kids to school in a sports car.
The point I was what's interesting for me about dating is that as in touch with my feminine side, I do try and just reassure on very subtle levels. Just let whoever I'm with know that, like I can take out the trash, I can kick some ass, and, I can still provide for you.
Yeah.
Even though, I may have bigger boobs than you do.
That's funny.
Which has been another issue. I have dated girls who had envy of my boobs.
Are your breasts real?
No. These are just, you can grab them. What I have here, they're technically real fake breasts. It's what would go into, if a woman were getting breast enhancement surgery, it's the silicone insert that would go in there. They sell that, so it has like the feel. You can grab it if you want. You do have to buy me dinner though. Okay. So it has the feel of a real boob.
It does.
And it just goes inside of a pocket bra. And then I put these on. And it's just so funny. This is the perfect example of just men feminize, the male version of the feminine experience. Of course, I went with the double D boobs. I would have gotten bigger if they sold them in a bigger size.
Why? But like men like double D boobs. So did you want double D boobs because you yourself like them, or you just like how they look?
Both.
Or because you identify as a woman with big boobs?
All of that.
Oh, okay.
All of that. And it's so funny, biologically, as in touch with my feminine side as I am, I'm still a boy biologically.
Yeah.
And I'm not in denial about that. And I still have these boy-like urges. And one of the urges, men, they just love boobs. They go to strip. I mean, you know how that goes. And they're just like, ah. And that's just one of the things that all of a sudden I look down and they're right there. And so I have to kind of not be like like a frat boy at a strip club, like, oh, look at these, woo! I put a $20 bill down my own bra sometimes. But yeah, I make jokes about it. It's interesting, the perspective I have, because to a degree, I'm attracted to myself. I see myself in the mirror. I'm like, ooh, I would totally date her, but that's me.
I guess I have so many insecurities. I guess just feeling like a woman, or being a woman. Just like, insecurities that come from just being a woman that other women have too, the exact same, like just across the board, all women have. And I guess just like when you love another woman, or when you, and maybe this even goes into, I think why I, kind of experimented with women, is because if you love another woman and you appreciate another woman's body, it's kind of like loving, yourself and loving your own body. And so maybe like my same-sex, sexual experiences were because I was trying to love my own body versus another woman's. And then also like with following Instagram models and like seeing like I could look through a Playboy and look at women's bodies and be like just mesmerized by how beautiful they are. And it's like almost like if I can feel this way about her body, then what's wrong with me feeling that way about mine, And maybe that's what it is.
Well, there's two factors at work in that situation you just described. In terms of, like how our core function as the animals that we are was just to reproduce. And the way that men would raise their reproductive value is through their ability to provide. And the way that women would raise their reproductive value is through attention to their beauty.
Oh, yeah.
And I just realized as you were describing that, how, I've never gone like on Instagram and followed male models, but yet men are very obsessed with the cars that other men are driving.
Well, that's the thing.
I've checked out houses, like houses that they live in. And so it's like the things I check out as a man would relate to the ability to provide. We tend to like evaluate men in terms of their ability to provide, which is why men impress other men with their sports cars, with their houses. And with women, you don't really have that. What raises your reproductive value is your attention to your own beauty. And so that tends to be the focus, why you would look at yourself, because it's just reassuring. You're an attractive female, and it would just be reassuring that, okay, and this is all on a genetic level. This isn't really anything conscious, because consciously we've, evolved out of like so many of these traits, but yet we're still slaves to them. Like homophobia, for example. For a longest time, people lived in tribes that were only 50 people. And if two, men that were of child rearing age were making love with each other, it could mean extinction for the tribe. And so transphobia and all that, it triggers this like apocalyptic like twang in people. And as consciously as we've evolved past it, we're still just kind of subject to all of that. And so like you checking out the beauty, me, like when I, deliver food, I look at houses in Beverly Hills and I feel that sense of admiration almost that you would when looking at, a female model on Instagram. It's like, that's what, men tend to vibe with and tend to focus on. And it's just funny, with all these, we got our fancy coffee shops, we got our high-rise buildings, but we're still just cave people to a degree. And I think that's why stand-up is so important for the human experience, because very little of it makes sense. And that's why I don't mind the well-natured trans jokes, to a degree. They pass the smell test, because it's just helping those people cope with the, we tend to react. We want order in the world. And when we see things that aren't, in line with what we're used to, if laughter helps people deal with that, then I certainly don't mind it.
Right.
And, like up to a point. But yeah, definitely. It's just funny how comedy is what all brings us all together to talk about these issues.